So I was originally planning to do some sort of Christmas video this year, you know, something silly and fun, like a silly cover or, you know, some sort of songwriting challenge. And I came up with a couple of ideas, but each one I was trying to do, I realized I really wasn't that into, or it wasn't coming out well. And I got myself really stressed about the fact that I needed to make a Christmas video. And then I thought, actually, you know what? I don't need to make a Christmas video. Because I guess I'm just not really feeling all that Christmassy at the moment. And I think a big part of why is just because I am so excited about next year and what's going on moving forward. A silly Christmas video just wasn't what I was in the mood for making. So instead I thought what I wanted to make as my last sort of video of the year was something a bit more relaxed and just more reflecting on this year and what next year hopefully will hold. Hi guys, it's Emma, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, then welcome to the chaos. I do all things music related on this channel, from putting up covers and show reels to show people what I'm like as a performer, to doing music production, songwriting, and audio engineering styly content. And every now and then, I just do stuff where I'm just talking about music, or just talking about what life is like as a musician, and this video is a bit more like one of those sorts of videos. Because it is the end of the year at this point, and, you know, just side note, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you all when that happens. But the end of the year is obviously that time of year for like reflecting on things and thinking about what next year is going to hold for you and all that stuff. So on that sort of theme today, I want to just talk about 5 of the big things that I learnt this year in terms of music production, recording, all of that sort of stuff that have been some of the big important key moments for me learning wise in the year, because I have done a lot of progress this year. 2023 has kind of just been the year of learning and the year of actually starting to put plans in place for me, like the proper plans and proper steps forward. And because of that, my year hasn't really looked like putting out a bunch of new songs and making big numbers on streaming or anything like that. It's looked a lot more like bits of progress behind the scenes that hopefully will start to pay off big time next year. Anyway, on with the main meat of the video. Here are 5 big things that I have learnt and improved on this year. And this will include links in the description to resources that help me with this. So, number 1, the big one is visible behind me. This year I learned all about room acoustics, big time. I have read so many different articles on where you should place various bits of sound treatment in your room, the benefits of different types of sound treatment, and the really big thing, I learnt how to make your own acoustic panels, and then made my own acoustic panels. And that's a big thing for me because a lot of the people I know in real life who work as recording engineers and producers and stuff, they all make a lot of their own of this stuff, you know? Down to like studio furniture and stuff. The people I respect most who've taught me a lot of stuff, they all make their own of these sorts of things so that they can have something more custom that fits their space perfectly. And also it means that you then really know how all this stuff works and what's actually going into it, and then what's worth actually spending money on. And these acoustic panels were so easy to make. I got really intimidated by the idea of actually handling rock wool, because the insulation I decided to go with was rock wool because, you know, I couldn't really afford anything else. And it is dangerous, don't get me wrong on that. You don't want to get this stuff in your eyes, you don't want to breathe it in, you don't want to get it on your skin because it will cause a huge amount of irritation. So it's really important, if you do decide to make your own acoustic panels and you use rock wool, the biggest piece of advice I have for you that everyone kept giving me whilst giving stories of when they did not follow it themselves, but it is important, if you're going to handle it, wear long sleeves, fully cover your skin, basically. Preferably wear something that you can easily take off and rinse down, because the fibres, they just sort of get all over the place. So I would recommend wearing some sort of cagoule or something. That's what I went with. I went with a cagoule, because then you can just take that off and rinse it off once you're done. Wear gloves, wear goggles, wear a mask. Anyway, that's the PSA section of this video. Anytime you're doing any sort of DIY stuff, just respect the health and safety rules. As a general rule, a lot of accidents and issues people are going to have are going to be because they didn't actually do things correctly health and safety wise. But also, if you really don't want to use rock wool, there are alternatives that you can use out there. They're just pricier and harder to get your hands on. You want to go with the slabs that are cut into a shape and then build your frame to that shape as much as possible, just because the less you have to cut it, the better. I only did one cut of one slab because I needed half for a bass trap, and the other half of that went in the big panel, and yeah, that was the trickiest part. So you need some sort of insulation, then you need to build a frame out of wood. There are a few different methods for this. Most people online will show you a method where you use 2x4s to create a frame. I went with a method where I've linked the video that I basically followed in the description below for making mine, that used a smaller thin frame on the back, and I'll show you the back of the panel so you can see what I mean. That is made out of wood that is about 40mm in thickness. That is the main structural thing that's holding the panels together. And then there is plywood just nailed to the sides. Then you just want to put a piece of fabric on the back, just stapling it to the frame itself works very well. Then you put in your insulation, and then you cover the whole thing in fabric. I found the easiest way was to lay all of the panels out, put all the insulation on top of the fabric, then put the panel on top of that around the insulation, and then wrap the fabric round. It was just easier than trying to put the insulation into the panel and then putting the fabric over the top and then wrestling the fabric and the insulation that hasn't all been secured in place over so that you can staple it in the back. Fabric types, you want to go with a cotton canvas is your best. Something that is not too loose a weave, because obviously you want it to cover the insulation, but you don't want to go with too tight weave because you actually want to allow the sound waves to get through into the insulation, because the insulation is the thing that's doing the absorbing of the sound. You don't want the weave to be too tight because the sound waves won't get absorbed through as easily. Plus, cotton canvas is pretty cheap. My base trap and my big panel are the ones I think I'm actually prouder of, because when it came to hanging these big panels, this was easy. I just basically put hooks in the back and string across and then hang them like a picture. But I couldn't figure out how the hell you hang a bass trap, and there is basically no advice online for how to do that. But there was a piece of advice online for someone who wanted to hang something else in the corner of a room, and they did it by putting a piece of wood that had been cut, 45-degree angle cuts on either side that goes into the corner. There's quite a messy job of one of the screws, but it stays up, and that's the important thing. It doesn't look pretty, but it stays up. And then you want some sort of hook. So for mine, I've got a couple of 90-degree angle brackets literally just screwed into the frame that are the right length that way, and they hook over this piece of wood. My big panel, I basically decided to just follow the way that people make these panels generally, with the 2x4s and the supports inside, and then that is just covered with fabric again and secured to 2 pieces of wood acting as a base with wheels on them. And then I also opted to put chains on each of the sides just to add that extra bit of protection against it possibly doing this. It also makes it easier to move them around, actually, having the chains, not gonna lie. It makes it much easier to move that panel around. Anyway, not the point. The point being, I learned how to do that, and that skill is now a skill I have that means if I need any other pieces like this in this room, I can make them. I'm now not afraid of doing stuff like cutting holes into bits of furniture for wires to go through and all that stuff. Hey, number two, you will actually remember from a recent video, I have learned a lot about mic preamps this year. I'm still very much learning when it comes to more of the audio engineering side of stuff, and the more traditional audio engineering I am still learning a huge amount about. But mic preamps were a big moment for me this year because I finally understood why they are important, what they actually do, why you would pick one over another. Penny drop moment, you know, suddenly it all clicks. Everything with that makes so much more sense to me now. And obviously I did a recent video where I talked about this a little bit because I was comparing the mic preamps in my audio interface to a separate outboard mic preamp that I had acquired recently. The mic preamp is a mic pre-amplifier. That's what it is. It amplifies the signal. It literally just takes the tiny little signal that comes out of this and it makes it big enough that you can do stuff with it. I feel like I encountered so much stuff about mic preamps before that just really was not making that bit clear to me. But then I was just watching some videos just about microphones, not even about mic preamps themselves, but about microphones, explaining why the signal that comes out of microphones is so small. And that's when things really started to click. Anywho, on to some more fun ones now. Number 3. The next 2 are both about reverb. I feel like I got my head around how compression works and what you're supposed to use it for, and just, you know, still struggling to hear it a lot of the time. EQ, fully understand how that works, can hear it a lot better now than I used to be able to. Reverb, though. Reverb was a tricky one for me. There's loads of advice out there about compression and EQ, to the point where you really don't need to pay someone to teach you how to do compression and EQ, because there is a video out there that tells you all the same stuff these courses are going to tell you. The help for reverb, much less common. But I learned 2 really helpful tips this year about doing reverb. So tip number 1, I learnt the importance of placing EQ on your bus with your reverb before you put the reverb plugin in. So anytime you put reverb on something, most of the time you're going to want to put it on a bus. When you're putting together this bus, it's a good idea to put an EQ on before you put your reverb plugin on. You'll quite often want to high pass pretty much every reverb bus that you're putting on something. You're going to want to high pass before you put the reverb on. Sometimes you might want to low pass a bit as well, but you might also want to drop out or, you know, just bring down certain frequencies and certain ranges on certain instruments that you don't want the reverb acting on, or at least not as strongly. So if you put the EQ on this bus channel before your reverb, it's basically just going to drop those frequencies out so the reverb doesn't touch them. So quite often now when I'm doing a reverb and I'm not liking the tone of the reverb, I'll just go back to that first EQ, find the frequencies that are around the right range for that tone, drop them out, problem solved. Number 4 and number 2 in the reverb category. I'm putting these in separately because they were big changing moments for 2 different reasons. Putting a compressor on your reverb bus after your reverb plugin and side chaining it back to the instrument that you want to cut through, the instrument that you're putting this reverb on, but you still want it to cut through the mix. For instance, if I am reverbing a lead vocal in particular, reverbing, that doesn't sound like it's actually a verb, and I want a really big, massive reverb with a really long tail, that can get messy quickly. And you might still want to have quite a dry vocal signal, quite a clean vocal cutting through that mix. Compression is your friend here. Putting a compressor on after the reverb that you then sidechain to the vocal, so that every time the vocal goes above a certain volume, which, you know, you set it so that your threshold is pretty low, so your vocal basically just has to make any noise at all. Anytime that happens, crash down that reverb, bring it right down so it's barely there at all, so that your vocal is still, your actual lead line is still coming through really clean, but you've got all that atmospheric reverb still going on in between when the lines of the vocal aren't coming out themselves. And this is just a great trick, I think, to do with reverb in particular, of putting a compressor on and sidechaining it. Using sidechaining with compression was a big thing that I started practicing more. It wasn't something I necessarily learned this year, which is why I'm not counting that as a thing in and of itself, because I did learn about that last year, really. But, you know, side chaining with compression can lead to all sorts of interesting tricks, but in particular, using side chaining with compression on reverbs to bring down that messiness around something you want to still cut through is something that can really help you get the tone you want, but also still have a nice clean mix. It's a really important trick that has revolutionized my mixing. Number 5. The last one is probably the thing that has made me approach production and mixing differently the most here. And it's to not be afraid of layering things. This year I learned the importance of not just not being afraid to layer things, but to layer things as much as possible. Don't be sitting there searching for your perfect kick sound. Make it. Find 3 kick samples you really like that are giving you different things, you know, a really punchy one, a really big beefy one that's got a really long reverb tail to it, one that's got a lot of sub bass in it. Throw them together and all of a sudden you've got your lovely boomy kick that you've just spent hours looking for. It's quicker than spending hours and hours and hours just searching through kick samples for the perfect one, because let's face it, a lot of the time the perfect one does not exist. But also it means you have something more unique. You can shape it more to your track, and it's more creative. And you can do this with everything, you know, kicks, snares, toms, basically any drum sound. Layering it could be the way to go to get you exactly what you want. I did it recently I was trying the reversed cymbal thing, you know, a reversed crash cymbal is your whoosh into something. And I'm there putting all these different reversed cymbals on, like none of these are quite working. And I realized that what I really needed was I needed that reversed cymbal giving me that nice high, but I needed something lower in there, more in a mid-frequency range to give me more of a as well. And I thought, you know, I can spend forever looking for a cymbal sample that has that in it, that doesn't also have a bunch of other annoying things in it that I don't want, or I could just get a snare, throw reverb on that, reverse that, and throw that in underneath this cymbal, and boom, all of a sudden I've got exactly the reversed sound I wanted, but I did it by layering 2 together instead of looking for the perfect one. And I should have done that 2 hours ago. But layering applies to everything in mixing. Layer it in, mix it in, EQ the bejesus out of it, throw a load of reverb on it, do whatever you have to do to it. But adding in those extra sounds to get the sound you actually want works a lot better than spending forever looking for the perfect sound on Splice. Anywho, those are the 5 big things that I learnt this year that have improved me as a producer. I'll do this video again next year, you know, and see what I've learned at the end of next year. Because I think it's important to actually, you know, when you've spent a year like I have, where it's easy to look at my year a little bit and think, oh, I haven't really achieved much or done much this year, because there are no big moments I can point to. But I have done so much in terms of growing and honing my craft for the areas of music I actually want to work in. And that was the goal for the year. I will be doing a video literally just going over all of the changes I've made to this little home studio space and looking at what my setup was at the start of this year and what it is now at the start of the next year. But that will be in the new year that video goes up, because this is my last video of the year. I hope this has provided a space for you guys to maybe sit and reflect on things you did this year, and also start thinking about what you want to do next year. Anywho, that is all for the year, guys. Thank you for following me if you've been sticking around through all of this. If you've been new to this channel this year, then welcome. I hope you continue to enjoy the content I put out next year, and hopefully we get to see some more big progress next year, and I'll be able to tell you guys about all sorts of exciting things I'm doing next year, and not just, you know, I built some panels. If there are any particular video ideas that you would like to see me do for next year, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, have a good New Year's celebration, or, you know, sleep through it, whichever you're planning to do. I will be out gigging, as always. And I shall see you guys in the new year with more fan content. Bye, guys! Hey, let's take another